There's an interesting question in the chat that I think is more for James and I, but hey, we could all three talk about it. Uh, Old Scratch asks, why does your God need to threaten you? And I personally love the topic of fearing and loving God, but I'll let you guys go with it first, and we could start with James on this one.
Yeah, so I think that he must be referring to the idea of like the threat of punishment, yeah, like of hell in particular. In Christian theology, it would be because like there's a real threat, and that's God's. I think it's, if you think about it, if anything, like God letting us know, or being threatening, so to speak, like outwardly, is like a good thing if you grant that there's an actual punishment awaiting you, right? Because it's like, well, at least God gave you a warning. He at least told you, hey, hell is coming. There's this way in which you can be saved through Jesus, but otherwise, yeah, hell is coming. Like, it seems better than if God would not have warned you and just let you live your life without ever having heard of a spiritual thing, in which case you just die and then you go to hell and then you never had a shot. So that would be my answer. And maybe his, like, he was like trying to get more to the deeper level of why there's hell. And I would just say that I think that in the same way that if I did something wrong, like I punch a stranger, like anybody would agree, I think, like whether it be racism or if it were just punching a stranger for a random reason, that would be wrong. And that a just judge, if you were to stand in front of him, you say, yeah, I randomly punched a person in the face, a just judge would say, okay, well, obviously I wouldn't be good if I didn't punish you. And I say, well, I did a lot of community service since then, Your Honor. Can we let this slide? They'd say, well, that's good that you did that. It doesn't erase your bad stuff, though. So I would just say that that's why our good works can't save us.
Let me pick up on that and follow up with the guy's question. Couldn't God have just given every single person their own universe where they couldn't have hurt anyone else in? They could do whatever you want with your own universe, and given us the option of whether or not we wanted to just live in our own universes independent of anyone and then not even risk the heaven or hell dichotomy? Why do we even need this whole hell thing in the first place?
I love that. I love that. The main thing that I'll take the initiative on this one, I suppose, if we're going in just order here. I think that the main thing that I talk to Calvinists about, and by the way, James, would I love to talk to a Calvinist at some time in the future, because I love open theism. But the main thing is that God could have made this world perfect without sin and not have to worry about any of this, no Satan, no hell. That's definitely true. We got to ask ourselves, if that's not how God made it, then, in my opinion, he didn't predestine everything and he doesn't control everything. Because if he did, it would be perfect. And that's my opinion. But I think that God gave us free will for the true nature of relationship. And this is where I also believe, because, all three of us are a few gents who really like sovereignty and liberty, right? That's exactly what God gives. He gives every opportunity, every actual opportunity to believe, to trust, believe in him, to have heaven forever. It's not like he necessarily takes anything away, but if we want to go our own way and basically disagree with God, then we also have the right to do that as well. So I think that God views sovereignty and autonomy over him making people robots, and that's a lot of the reason why the two options exist. So other than a lot of people saying, well, I guess I have to go to hell because I just don't want to believe in God. Well, no, you absolutely have the option to not do it. It's just based on your liberty and what you want within the situation. So that would be like my answer toward it. I guess I'll let James go next on kind of his, because that's a really good question. I wanted to, I think it warrants an answer. So yeah, we'll let James go with it next.
Yeah, so we would probably have different answers on this. We definitely do. Which, by the way, is also another. I can't help but want to talk about this like interesting issue of like whether or not that's bad. Whether or not it is.
What's bad?
Well, the fact that Christians have different interpretations, I think a lot of skeptics like really hang their hat on that, and I don't see it as that. I know that I'm changing, and I'm openly admitting like I'm changing the subject. I think your answer, I can give you an answer to your question, but maybe we can come back to this one that I just brought up.
Yeah, sure.
So maybe as the next one. So I'm not sure. So on the face of it, it doesn't seem logically contradictory for God to do what you're proposing, Tom. You know what I mean? That like there's nothing in that like description in which there, at least to us, like where there couldn't be some sort of logical consistency. I don't know if there are like these ways in which it could not be possible for God to do it. The only way I would say is if there were like some sort of case in which, like if that example that you gave, if that's somehow not logically possible, then I actually don't think it would like take away from God's omnipotence to say he couldn't do it, because I would use basically tracing back to is this Occam? I can't remember who it was, but who would say that God's omnipotence didn't entail being able to do the logically impossible, but that omnipotence was something that was, you could say, in a way more qualified. So that's my only response, is that if it is logically impossible, that would be one way in which it would seem to be better to do the way things are, rather than the potential like counterfactual that you had mentioned.
I'd actually like to follow up on that if you wanted, before you go on to your next point. So let's say God could give me the option, like, because we all like liberty and freedom. So why don't I have the freedom to go to my own universe where I can just be alone and do whatever I want? I can still have free will. No one else can hurt me. There doesn't seem to be anything immoral or wrong about this. But you can just give every human being the right to just go to their own universe if they want to, or go to a universe that, in which case you can't hurt other people. Like if you threw a coffee mug at me, it would just pass through me, kind of like if I was a ghost or something. God could have created this best world where everyone has total freedom or total sovereignty over themselves and no one could ever harm them. And we can still have free will. There's no contradiction there, because you would have the choice to live in a world exactly like the one we live in right now. So all of the benefits God could, or God could potentially have, or reasons God could potentially have not to give us this world, would be obtainable in this world. They would just be optional. So that would mean that everybody who wants to live under a God-designed world can do so. The only difference is those that don't want to live under a God-designed world can go to their own universe and live however they want to. And that seems to be significantly more moral than the world we live in now.
I think that's really interesting. And James, I'll let you go first on this one. But yeah, I definitely want to comment after him, because I like where this is going. I think this is getting down to some brass tacks that I like.
Yeah. So I'm not sure if this is in response to, this seems like it maybe was more in response to John, just so I can be sure I'm understanding you right, because I hadn't invoked free will, but I think John had mentioned free will as part of his explanation. So is this more, or maybe it's in response to both of us, or maybe it's a, oh, okay. Yeah. So it's not, so I think if it is the case that certain counterfactuals, like the one that you had mentioned, isn't possible, that if it's not possible that God could do that, then maybe let's say like it is logically contradictory in some way. Now, in which case I would just say that, the reason that God couldn't do it is because it's logically contradictory, and omnipotence doesn't contain underneath it the ability to
interrupt a little bit.
Yeah.
So everything I said that in my model is things we already have in this world. So it can't be logically contradictory, or this world would be logically contradictory.
Wait, so things in this world, the way I thought you were describing it is that you were in your own universe. Like, that doesn't seem to be the case in this world, right?
Well, it'd be the same kind of world that we have here. It's still made of matter and energy and all of the things we have here, and the same level of free will of whatever we have here. Like, all of the things in the universe I described are entailed in the world we live in now. There's just more of it. So there can't be anything that's logically contradictory there, because then that would mean that our world is logically contradictory in some way.
I think that I agree with you that it would be made of the same matter, but I don't think that it would follow that you couldn't have it be, so like, agreed it's the same matter, but if you're not in this world, you're in this own universe of your own, such that you wouldn't be here right now, right? Like, there wouldn't be a universe in which you and I were both existing simultaneously, like, because you'd be in another one, right? So it would be conceptually different, right?
Yes, but all of the parts to it would just be the same kind of parts. So there couldn't be any logical contradiction there.
There's not any logical contradiction within. That's agreed. Like, in your universe, there's no clear contradiction of way in which that counterfactual couldn't be. And there's no way in which the counterfactual of me being here without you being in my own universe couldn't be. But I'm not sure if the broader makeup could have all of that as a counterfactual being possible. I agree that it's not clear to me how it is a logical contradiction, but I'm thinking that if it is in some way not possible for God to do that because it's a logical contradiction, that would be a reason why it's not done.
Well, I mean, if we have one world, God's all powerful, he could create two, and then he could give me the option to go to one. There's nothing logically contradictory in any of those statements. So it seems like you're just applying logically contradictory to anything that disagrees with your worldview. I don't think that's really reasonable, because you'd have to actually identify a logical contradiction. Otherwise, it's clearly not, because everything that I just said is something we already have. If we already have it in this world, it can't be logically contradictory.
Well, so we agree, like a counterfactual though, like you're describing like everything as being in this world. Basically,
let me see if I can explain it this way. Think of it like Lego pieces. If we have a whole bunch of Lego pieces, none of the Lego pieces can be logically contradictory, because then they wouldn't exist. So if we can combine these Lego pieces in a different way, whatever combination we make, none of them can potentially ever be logically contradictory, because none of the pieces of themselves logically contradictory. And so that's all I'm doing, is I'm taking the pieces of the world we have now, combining them in a different way to get a different kind of a world, specifically to avoid the argument that it's logically contradictory. That's the whole point of this. I'm only using pieces that we already have that are definitely not logically contradictory in this world to build this model.
Yeah, I think I understand that. So if you have counterfactual worlds, so like we agree that in, like, let's say, let me try to think of this Lego analogy. If you have like a certain like way in which they're made, like you make a certain object and then you make a different object, but it's not really the way the analogy isn't quite correct though, is that like you'd be taking, like, wouldn't it be the case you'd be taking, like, so you have like Lego pieces, you have, like, let's say a set of 50 pieces that make up some object in world A, and then you took out certain pieces and like world A. So we agree though that world, like, let's say the broad concept of world A with the 50 pieces within it making up whatever, that's one concept. Now we have a different concept, like concept B, and that's got the Legos configured in a different way. But some of them are like not within B anymore. Like you put some of them also like so that they're outside of B, or I should say not B, because that's the concept. Like,
I think I get where you're going with this, but I mean, the universe is pretty huge. There are trillions and trillions of galaxies. We don't even need to create another universe. You can just let's go to our own galaxy, pretty much. And I still don't see why it would be logically impossible for God to just create another one. He did it once. I don't see why it would be logically impossible for him to create another one.
Yeah. To create another universe. Let me think about this. So you're saying that so there are all these different universes, and you can put, like, in some cases you put one person in a different universe. So this is a counterfactual, right?
Potentially. Well, you can think of it like The Matrix. Have you seen the movie The Matrix?
Yeah.
In the movie The Matrix, we are, as human beings, almost to the point technologically where we can create the world I'm describing. It is physically possible for us as humans to make this world, which means it can't be logically impossible, or else we wouldn't be able to do it. So the idea that God can do it, he would be able to do it much simpler, and not just with ones and zeros, but with the laws of physics. So it can't be logically impossible. It's not even an option, because we humans are almost at the point where we can do this.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to think more about this. I think the Matrix example actually makes it a little bit clearer. So to be honest with you, I'm not sure.
Awesome.
Fair answer. I have to get back to you. Like I'll read and I'll see if I can find something. But the Matrix, that does actually make it does. It resonates more with me.
And did you want to respond?
Oh, no? Sure. I think that the way that God made this universe, there are some things that are determined. If we want to look at it from a biblical standpoint, that would be absolutes, such as the concept of sin and such as the concept of needing an atonement for it. I often get the question, and I think it is a good question. I have even been reading like more of Leviticus lately, which is the stuff I don't get into as often. It's a little bit more dry to read.
Oh, those are my favorite parts, Leviticus and Deuteronomy, the most colorful parts of the Bible.
They're definitely very interesting. As I was figuring out last night, refreshing my memory on them. But that really showed that God shows that without the shedding of blood, there's no remission of sin. Like there needs to be some kind of justification for allowing sin to pass from his presence. And that's when we get into a lot of the theories about the atonement. I'm not exactly sure what kind of theory that James would hold. I myself am sifting through the theories as well. I'm kind of stuck on looking at what would be called a moral government theory, basically saying that because Christ was sacrificed, God now forgives sin. It wouldn't necessarily be like his death paid for sin. Like instead of there being a payment, like because of that happening, God now forgives sin. Like it was I still go that it is a substitute and that it needed to happen for sin to be forgiven. But I look at it rather as a forgiveness of sin rather than the debt of sin being paid. So I think it starts getting into an interesting ground there. But the main thing in regard to that would be the fact that God's universe necessitates a payment for sin. That's when it's a little tougher to go into the other paradigms, especially when it's like under a potential Christian worldview. So my main questions for Tom would be something like, how do you feel about the concept of sin, and how would you philosophically address what you would view sin to be, and what kind of like philosophical standpoint do you hold in regard for such as like a rule util or anything such as that? Like what do you like in that philosophical aspect, and how does it relate to your view of what sin would be?
Well, first, I'd like to respond to your first point. Let's say we have like in my model where everyone gets their own universe. One of those universes is the one we're living in right now. So we still have all of the sin, all of the Jesus dying for our sins, everything is still in this universe that I'm describing. And the only difference is that the people who don't want to be a part of this universe have the option to leave and go to their own universe. So we still have all the sin, we still have all the free will, we still have all the benefits that God put into this world. The only difference is the people who don't want to be in it can just go to their own universe and be like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to have anything to do with this. They still have all the sin. They haven't lost anything. They just moved, pretty much.
I think to that point, I would say like God demands a payment for sin, and that's kind of like when that's basically when the paths cross, I would say, like for that first answer. So just to give like a point of crystallization and what would be talked about going in for the future of that point. I am, even for both of you guys, still interested to know like philosophically, like how would the morality look like? For me personally, I love the idea of, I guess you would say, the veil of ignorance, but at the same time,
John Rawls, yeah.
yeah, it's just really good. A part of me, like a very curious part of me, like I like the idea of rule util because it just goes to like the top point of altruism. To give a quick summary, that would basically be like you could pull someone off the street, harvest their organs, and save 5 people. You saved more people than you lost, therefore it's moral. That kind of idea. Sometimes I think if someone really says they're altruistic and loves their neighbor as their self, would they be okay with sacrificing their civil liberty? I find myself getting a little scared at that conclusion and saying, oh no, I don't want to just randomly die. So, I do want liberty, but is that selfish of me to think that? That's what I ask myself. So how do you guys feel about certain moralities, such as a rule util, which would be considered extreme? I think objectively it's extreme, whether it's good or bad. But then what do you guys think, like what would you go for as far as your ideal moral system? And we can start with James on this one and then come back to Tom.
Yeah, so I think that this is relevant, especially in the case of, let's say, the evangelists going to a different country that may be where people could get an illness. This is actually, it's the last question I could probably do, and then I got to go. But let me try to answer it. So there's a part of me that really consequentialism appeals to, and I do it like probably on my day-to-day, like fairly often. I feel like I'm acting and reasoning like a consequentialist from like, it's not a big deal, no harm, no foul kind of reasoning. And that's kind of, I think, the way the Christian is led to well, if you said that a person going to a country and they risked the people of that country getting a disease because they were trying to bring the gospel or something, maybe another religious message. To say it's wrong, I feel like I'd be a consequentialist, which I'm not. Like, I at least say I'm not a consequentialist. Like, it's not the ethical theory I think I adhere to. Because if the person were to go there and their intentions were right, they were trying to do the right thing. They were thinking, this could be their eternal salvation. That seems like I can't condemn them, right? Unless I'm a consequentialist. To condemn them and say like, that was wrong. We could have gotten those people a disease that would actually maybe take their lives. That, to me, I feel like I'd be painted into a corner as a consequentialist. Is there any way out of that? Am I wrong?
Well, one thing I think you could consider is like, for being a consequentialist or maybe a pragmatist, maybe the probability of them receiving eternal salvation versus the probability of them getting the disease, and then how fast and how brutally it would kill them. So I think you got to put all those through the machine before really making that decision. But I think it gives you kind of an out because you can kind of put it one way or the other to fit your liking, I guess, in that respect.
That makes sense. Yeah, Tom?
I actually wrote a model of objective morality. It's like one of my more recent videos. So my view of objective morality is any involuntary imposition of will is immoral. And so from my perspective, John, when you said that God demands some kind of payment for sin or something, I don't remember exactly the phrasing.
That's pretty much it.
So for me, that's just objectively immoral. So if God does that, then God is by definition immoral and can't be all good. Any kind of not giving us the option, the freedom to go to our own universe is kind of no different than slavery. He's forced us into this world against our will, which we have no option for. To me, that's just objectively immoral based on my model of morality.
That's interesting. It gives me like a point of reference for what you think. If you could send us the link to that kind of video, I think that would be interesting to go over. I would definitely take a look at it.